Greetings, fellow detectives. Wizard Kitten here, bringing you my review of the 33rd mystery in the Nancy Drew series, Nancy Drew Midnight in Salem. As usual, my reviews are based on 5 separate categories. Those categories are plot, characters, setting and design, entertainment and gameplay value, and music and vibe. Each of those categories is scored on a scale of 1 to 10 with a final possible score out of 50, and then I assign each game a letter grade as well. So without further ado, let's get into our review for Nancy Drew Midnight in Salem. Now, this mystery starts with Nancy actually in Austria instead of Salem, which is kind of new for this series. She doesn't usually start in one location and then go to the next. But Nancy is in Austria on a mission for her dad to get something called the Book of Apologies. It's apparently been stolen around the same time that Nancy ends up being called to Salem, Massachusetts, to help Deirdre solve an arson mystery that involves Deirdre's cousin, May Perry. So the mystery involves Nancy really finding answers related to the arson of the Hathorne House, a historic building with close ties to the Salem witch trials for which May is suspected, while also attempting to solve the mystery of the stolen Book of Apologies, figuring out how those two crimes kind of relate to one another, and then also learning a little bit about Salem's history. Now, before I played this game, I saw some people commenting that sure, the game looks bad, sure, the graphics are kind of crappy, but at least the story was good. Unfortunately, I have to disagree. I would say that the plot satisfies solely the basic requirements of a mystery plot, while adding no actual intrigue, twists, or excitement. My biggest issue is that we as the detectives are really nothing more than passive observers to the plot. We are literally told what to do every step of the way, and then instead of having any real ability to actually make choices, we just sit along for the ride, almost like we're in an interactive movie. So that's really my first issue. We don't get to be detectives in a mystery game. We just get to watch it unfold. I think that was a really weird change that didn't add anything to the overall structure of the game and honestly detracted a whole ton from what the games are actually supposed to help us feel like, the actual ambiance, the actual task of being a detective. We're supposed to be able to make choices, not just be along for the ride. My next issue is that everything was so predictable. The ultimate culprit reveal is ruined about, I'd say, like 2 to 3 hours before the game is finished, if you're paying even a modicum of attention. Yes, there are several characters, but it becomes abundantly clear that really only about 3 of them are actual suspects, because obviously the Hardy Boys are not going to be suspects, and obviously Deirdre Shannon isn't going to be a suspect, obviously Nancy isn't going to be a suspect, and it wouldn't make a whole lot of sense for the mystery to just unravel with May Perry being the culprit. So really we end up whittling down our cast of characters to a very small set of actual possible culprits. So even though it looks like we have more options, we really don't. And the clues that we find come purely from character interaction. So it's very easy to follow along with those clues and the things that people are saying and figure out who the culprit is, figure out what's going to happen next in the mystery. There's really no surprise elements, which was pretty disappointing in a mystery plot. My third issue is that there are certain reveals in the game that were told to us despite there being no clues to actually back those events up, which means that there's no way that we could have reached the conclusion on our own. This to me is the cardinal sin in mystery writing. If the characters have to tell me what happened, and there was no evidence for me to find that could have helped me discover the answer for myself, then the writing is simply bad. The point of a mystery is that there are supposed to be clues littered throughout that lead you to certain conclusions, and if the only way you can get to a certain conclusion is by hearing it from a character, then it's not a mystery. Then it's something else. But it's not a mystery. My fourth issue is that there were several plot holes and events that weren't really explained. For example, there's one character that's like unconscious at one point, and we never find out why they were. There's a note that we find at one point. We never find out who wrote it. There are just a couple things that are never followed up on. I'm not sure why they were even added into the mystery. They didn't lead me into the direction of that many other characters. There's a jacket that's found at one point that is supposed to make me think that one character's suspicious, but nothing really comes out of that. Why would you have those clues and things in there if they aren't going to make me more confused about who the culprit would be? There's no follow-up on those, and therefore they feel kind of like empty things that were added in to just make us have things to find, even though they weren't even helpful. My fifth issue is that this story was supposed to be suspenseful and even scary, but I didn't feel scared once, and I am seriously the world's biggest wimp. I can't watch horror movies because they will prevent me from sleeping for weeks, and that is not an exaggeration. But this, it literally made me laugh. The scare moments made me laugh. That's how, first of all, how bad the writing was, and second of all, how poorly the suspense was manufactured. They literally did this thing where they foreshadowed every moment of scare factor before it happened. It was like a little PSA that a jump scare was about to happen. I was more afraid of Deirdre standing behind me than I was of literally anything that happened in this game. It wasn't scary at all, and it was supposed to be, and that's really disappointing. The Nancy Drew games have scared me a lot in the past. Shadow at the Water's Edge, Ghost at Thornton Hall, Curse of Blackmore Manor. Those games are terrifying. They managed to make me feel scared. This game did not. No possibility of me feeling scared whatsoever. And again, it's really easy to scare me. So that's a problem. My sixth issue, the balance of character interaction to everything else was so heavily skewed. One of the nice things about the Nancy Drew mysteries is that we have a nice balance of exploration, going through locations and finding clues, talking to characters and getting some clues that way, solving some puzzles and getting some clues that way. There is little to no exploration in this game and very few puzzles, and a lot of the puzzles that do exist are exceedingly simple. Like in the very beginning of the game, there's a quote-unquote labyrinth that it is like a maze that's the easiest maze I've ever seen in my entire life. It was just, it's not worth including a puzzle if it doesn't even require any skill. So we have some puzzles that aren't even very good, and then we have a ton of character interaction. So the balance was way off. My seventh issue, I feel like the history of Salem was so lightly skimmed over that it barely felt worth touching in the first place. It was pretty clear to me that the writers were simply using it as a way to manufacture drama without actually allowing us to learn anything of substance. It's like they used the Salem witch trials and the history of the families in Salem to make current characters be upset with one another, but we don't actually get to learn anything about the specific events that happened in Salem at the time. One of the wonderful things about previous Nancy Drew games is that they're extremely fun, but you also learn a whole lot when you're playing them. They're pretty educational, and this game just really wasn't. I didn't learn anything interesting, and when they talked about witches from the past or accused witches and their families and all of the drama surrounding those past times, it's in a very simple, factual way that doesn't relate it to the things that are happening in Salem at present in Nancy's mystery, which is just disappointing. Again, it just feels like poor writing. So in short, the plot satisfies really only the minimum requirements of what a plot should be, in my opinion. Is there a storyline? Yes. Is it compelling, intriguing, unique, interesting, thoughtful, educational, meaningful, or otherwise entertaining? I would say no. So therefore, I have to give the plot a 3 out of 10. Now let's move on to the characters. So there are actually quite a few characters in this game. However, some of them are allies of Nancy. So Frank and Joe Hardy are in this game as physical characters, and they are also playable characters at times, so you do get a chance to play as Frank and Joe Hardy, and Nancy gets a chance to talk to them. They have been in several games before this, whether as physical characters like in Last Train to Blue Moon Canyon or Creature of Kapu Cave, or just as phone friends. And then we have have Deirdre Shannon, who Nancy talked with in Alibi and Ashes, and then who was a phone friend in The Deadly Device. She's now a physical character in this game, and again, kind of an ally of Nancy, helping her solve the mystery. So we have those three characters that are really working with Nancy. We have May Perry, who is, I believe, a teenager. They kind of allude to the fact that she's pretty young. So a teenager in Salem who is accused of setting fire to the historic Hathorne house. There's really no evidence against her, but people in the town are suspicious of her because she had a history with a fire in her past. Then there's Tegan Perry, who is May's older sister. Tegan runs the Salem Museum and is very focused on the facts and the history of Salem. We have Olivia Ravencroft, who markets herself as a real witch. She does a lot of street magic and believes a lot more in the superstitions and the supernatural aspects of Salem. So she really represents kind of that aspect of Salem, whereas Tegan represents the historical aspect. Then we have Lauren Holt, who is the owner of a store called Luminous Infusions, which is supposed to be a modern apothecary and tea shop in Salem. She was the adopted daughter of the previous owner of Hathorne House and currently lives in a carriage house right near the Hathorne House. We have Judge Danforth, who is the judge in Salem. We have his son, Jason, who is his son. And then we have Alicia Cole, who is a lawyer for Salem. Those last three characters, obviously we don't get a whole lot of information about them. They're kind of just like judge, judge's son, lawyer. They're kind of one note. The others we get a little bit more information about, not as much as I would have liked, but let's look into this a little bit more deeply. So the characters, first of all, they look horrible. But I'll table that for now and get into more of that when we talk about setting and design in the next section. So this game is heavily based in character interaction, and in fact, that's about all that we do in the mystery. However, we don't have any choice in the conversations. Each interaction is literally just a series of questions that Nancy will ask in whatever order you choose, which again adds to the feeling of passivity that permeates this entire game experience. We don't have any actual choice. Some of the drama between the characters is fine, but so much of it feels superficial. Just like I was talking about in the writing, how it feels very one note and just kind of skims the surface, that's what the drama feels like. It's like three friends have a fight and now they don't like each other. Someone has money problems. Someone feels like an outcast. It's all very surface level, and we don't actually learn about the motivations for half of these characters. Like, why do you feel like such an outcast? Tell me your history. Why do you have money problems? What really was behind your fight? We sort of find out the answers for some of that, but not all of it. And the answers we do get, again, it's just pretty basic. It's not really interesting. We do get some more development for the Perry sisters, but we get almost no development for most of the other characters. It's like, why do they do what they do? I want them to feel like real people. They're just doing what they do because the game says so, I guess, and they need to get from point A to point B. They're barely memorable, and they barely feel like real, genuine people, which is a problem when so much of the game is character-driven. And let's talk briefly about the culprit reveal because it was real obvious. Beyond the fact that there was just no way for half of the characters to be the culprit, it just wouldn't make sense. The culprit's reason for doing what they did just feels like a huge stretch, and that's probably because we don't really get to learn much about them in any meaningful way. I do really love the idea of having more characters and suspects, but it doesn't do anything if talking to them is boring, and if it isn't plausible for more than a couple of them to be the actual culprit. Adding more characters at that point is just adding characters for no actual reason. So while there are some pluses to character interaction, I would say that most of the character interaction is kinda rough, so I have to give characters a 4 out of 10. Now let's move on to the setting and design, which takes into account the location of the game, how well it's executed, how nicely everything looks, and let's just say, oof. If you haven't heard about the graphics for this game, let me just tell you about them now. They are rough. Even on the high graphics setting, the characters somehow reverted about 20 years and look unfortunately similar to Stay Tuned for Danger. I was willing to put up with some robotic clay-like characters in Stay Tuned for Danger because that was a long time ago. That was like 20 years ago. But now, that's kind of unacceptable. The characters in this game are robotic, they're clay-like, they have no facial expressions, they move out of sync with their words all the time, not just their mouths, even their hands. They sway and bounce back and forth like they've drunk about 50 gallons of coffee. Literally, they're moving all the time, and they are frequently horribly delayed. I couldn't continue to play the game on the high graphics setting because of the lag, which meant I had to switch to the low graphics setting where the characters and the environments looked even worse. And most people will share my experience. I have a pretty mid-level to high-level computer. The Nancy Drew games were easily accessible to a wide audience. You used to be able to play them even on a low-end computer. In no way, shape, or form should I need a high-end gaming computer to play a game like this. It just doesn't make sense from a marketing standpoint, from a game-making standpoint. These are not high-end games. And even if you're trying to move into that direction, they did not succeed. And unfortunately, the background settings are just as bad. Literally every location looks ridiculous because there are practically no shadows, objects look like they are floating, or they look completely flat. Even though the environment is 3D, any objects that we see look totally two-dimensional. And we can only interact with about 5% of the environment that we see. This is usually a category that I give a high score to for almost every Nancy Drew game, because even in the older games, when the character designs were pretty funky, the environments at least always looked awesome. This is just laughable. And while we're at it, let's just talk about the setting as a whole. The museum, you can't even look at the exhibits. You can see things, but you can't zoom in and look at them. There are books in the museum, but most of them have typos or are extremely poorly written. Luminous Infusions, the tea shop, it has repeating items that look beyond fake and you can't interact with any of them. Same with Olivia Ravencroft's shop, can't look at anything and everything looks super fake. The town square looks fine-ish, but it is horrendous to navigate through. It's so hard to move through it. And the courthouse, you can look at about 2 things. The Perry House, you can also look at about 2 things, and the backgrounds otherwise are very flat and boring. The Hathorn House, the one that has the arson and is supposed to be like the super interesting location to explore, it literally only has 2 rooms to explore. We literally can only look at 2 rooms, and you can only look at one thing in those rooms. And the carriage house that's attached to the Hathorn House, you can't go inside. The cemetery is mostly fine. I can at least look at some of the gravestones, but most of the gravestones don't have any writing on them, and it's really obvious the things that I'm supposed to be able to see in the cemetery. So yeah, the setting is not well executed. At no point did I feel like I was actually in Salem, Massachusetts. At no point did I feel like the setting was interactive or engaging. No point did I feel like I could actually be there. This is easily the worst part of the game. The graphics were horrible, and normally that's not a big deal if there are other things that make up for it, but there just aren't. So unfortunately for setting and design, I have to give this game a 1 out of 10. Next, let's move on to entertainment and gameplay value. Yeah, so this game wasn't really fun for me. Let me just quickly read you the things that I look for in this category. Overall gaming experience is addressed in this category, particularly the ease with which players can navigate the game as well as replay value. A game that is choppy and incoherent, or a game in which players feel removed, would not receive a good score in this category. The flow of the game is also considered, as are the puzzles that the game includes. Do puzzles interrupt the game and seem out of place, or are they integrated nicely into the plot, serving a defined purpose? Are the puzzles entertaining and adequately difficult without being impossible? If these questions can be answered in the affirmative, then the game is likely to receive a good score in this category. So, there are hardly any puzzles in this game, and the ones that are included are sometimes laughably easy to the point where they don't even count as a puzzle. They just kind of count as clicking on the screen. The navigation is the most choppy it's ever been. Literally 10 times worse than anything in Secrets Can Kill or Stay Tuned for Danger, and those were made in the late 1990s, early 2000s. I understand that they're working with a new system here, but there is no way that it should have been that difficult to move around. Even when I was used to the navigation, I still got stuck in places half the time because the game wanted me to click in a very certain spot to move around. Also, the graphics are so distracting and often result in a horrendous lag. The scare factor that was supposed to be there to make me entertained was laughable. At no point did I feel immersed in the locations because they were designed so poorly, and I couldn't interact with any of them. So it's like, what in this game was supposed to be fun for me? Watching characters talk and not even getting to really interact with that conversation? The only reason I give this game a slightly higher score in this category is because there were a couple fun mini-game-esque things. Making Johnny cakes was fun, and making herbal remedies was mildly entertaining. Otherwise, this game was literally so disappointing. There was nothing in here that could count as entertainment value except for those two things. So unfortunately, I have to give entertainment and gameplay value a 2 out of 10. Next, let's move on to music and vibe. So this is another category where I almost always give games a high score, but I was unfortunately disappointed yet again. I look at the intention of the game when I look at this category, and the intention of this game was to be scary, exciting, and interactive. It was none of those things. I mentioned before that I'm a huge wimp when it comes to scare factor, and at no point did I feel unsettled. The music did nothing to make me feel creeped out, nor did the environments, nor did the writing. The actual moments of scare factor were always preceded with a warning shot of whatever was supposed to scare me sneaking up. There's literally no suspense if you tell me that it's coming. And I honestly can't even remember the soundtrack. With all of the other Nancy Drew games, I could hum some of the music immediately after playing it the first time, and remember a lot of that music. I can only do that with the weird, synthy music that plays when we're trying to connect with May, because it played on loop about 40 times before I was finished with that interaction with her. The music was below average. It wasn't the worst thing in the world. And the vibe was laughably poor. The vibe was real bad. That was perhaps the worst thing in the world. So, unfortunately, again, I have to give music and vibe a 2 out of 10. So, if we tally everything up, we have a 3 for plot, 4 for characters, 1 for setting and design, 2 for entertainment and gameplay value, and 2 for music and vibe. That gives us a total score of 12 out of 50, which results in an F grade, and the lowest score I've ever given a Nancy Drew game. So it now beats out the Shattered Medallion as my lowest ranked game in the series. Now that we've talked about the game, let's talk briefly about how this game process has been handled over the nearly 5 years since its announcement, because that plays pretty heavily into my review of the game. So this game was first announced in a teaser trailer at the end of Sea of Darkness, at which point we were told the game was set to release in fall 2015. Awesome, fans said. This looks great. Oh, but then August 2015 hit, and we were told that Her Interactive was switching over to Unity to start making the games, and that the game was now delayed until 2016. Fans were devastated. This had never happened before, but we were assured that the switch to Unity would allow for better games than we'd ever had before. So most fans said, okay, if this is going to make even better games, then we support you. Unfortunately, also around that time, Her Interactive stopped communicating any information about Midnight in Salem. If fans asked directly, which they did frequently because there was limited communication, fans were told repeatedly that there was no new information to share. Negative comments started to mysteriously disappear, which the company still denies it, but many fans assert that this has happened. And if you go to the Her Interactive website and try to look for information on Midnight in Salem, it's very difficult to find anything about this whole process. I got a lot of my information from an article called The Case of the Disappearing Nancy Drew Games. I will link that article in the description down below. It was really helpful when putting together this review, and it was written by Elizabeth Ballou. So I will link that in the description down below. But anyway, Then we trucked through 2016, and in an October 2016 letter, fans were told that significant progress had been made on art and programming, which hardly relates to even close to a completed game. So now we make it through 2016, but still no game. Then 2017 hits, and fans have received no new information. We wait all the way through 2017 until December, when the real kicker comes. The game won't be released until spring of 2019. Fans were told that the shift to Unity was difficult, and that Midnight in Salem would be a whole new immersive experience, better than before, and with a better vision for the company than before. Okay, so what? We wait 2 more years? Okay, so then we do that. We wait until spring 2019, but wait! The game release is pushed back again, with an official date this time, which is at least a plus, pre-orders on October 1st, and a game released on November 19th. Fans eagerly await the pre-order date. Some people take off work to do this. This is the first date that we've had in months, and then when it arrives, literally minutes before pre-orders are supposed to be available, Her Interactive says, just kidding. Pre-orders now are on October 15th, and the game will release on December 3rd. At this point, most fans, including myself, were livid. We were strung along for 4.5 years with little to no information, and the information that was shared was usually misleading or blatantly false because the release date was pushed back multiple times, sometimes by years. But still, loyal as I am, I pre-ordered a physical copy of the game from Her Interactive, paid the exorbitant shipping price, and gave it a fair shot. They promised that if we could just hold on for 4.5 years, they would deliver. And deliver they did. A big fat flop. I'm not upset because it's different. I am totally fine with the Nancy Drew games changing their form, going in a different direction. I'm not upset because it's different. I'm upset because it's bad. If the game was actually good and delivered me a quality mystery, the cool graphics that they talked about, cool movements and navigation like they talked about, I wouldn't be giving such a negative review. Again, I'm not upset because it's different. I'm upset because it's bad. I know that there are some fans who are saying, guys, this was their first try at a new game system. Give them a break. We can still support them. To which I say, please, please do. If you want to continue supporting them, any fan is perfectly within their rights to do so. Please, more power to you. I would absolutely love it if I felt that way. But it pains me to my core to say that I just don't. For them to make fans wait 4.5 years for this product, all the while saying that it will be innovative and exciting and new and better, is just a pack of lies. I'm not even upset at the game necessarily. The game is fine. There are a couple fun mini games. You can sort of have fun talking to the characters, and hey, it is sort of a mystery. What I am mostly upset at is what this company has done to my favorite series of games. It's atrocious. They took a company that was vibrant, intelligent, unique, and innovative and made it sneaky, fake, and superficial. I realized that Her Interactive was unable to sustain their current business model and that they couldn't continue to make games the same way. They just couldn't. They were in the red. They were going bankrupt. But I would have significantly preferred that they go out with grace. If Midnight in Salem had been completed as it was originally intended, with the message that, hey, we're sorry, but this is going to be the last Nancy Drew game, I would have been happy. I would have been bummed that there would have been new games, but the integrity of Nancy would have been maintained and the company wouldn't have turned into a complete joke. Instead, they took a beautiful series and company, gutted it, fired half the staff, outsourced half the project, misled fans, and then produced an ultimately subpar game. And this is how Interactive will probably go out. Not gracefully, but in a big, flat splat, where we, the loyal fans, just watch and, maybe even cry. Because it's that disappointing. Is this game good? No, I don't think so. Is this game worth purchasing? Only if you have a high-end computer that can actually play it, and even then, you're probably best waiting for a sale on Steam or Big Fish. I wouldn't recommend that you pay full price. Is Her Interactive going to make another game? Honestly, if they can only complete games at this level of quality every 4.5 years, then I would tell them that they shouldn't. I don't think it's worth the time, the money, or the effort. If Her Interactive does make another game, will I buy it? Maybe, but only out of a sense of loyalty and hope that little 11-year-old me found back when I first played the final scene. Do I still believe in Her Interactive as a company? No. They are a shell of what they once were, most of the original employees are gone, and they no longer represent the values that Nancy Drew aspires to. I am not thrilled that I have to say any of this, but I need to be transparent with you guys. Perhaps the most important question is, will I still play the original Nancy Drew games and love the series? Absolutely. The Nancy Drew games are one of my passions. I love every single one of the games from the Adventure series and even the 2 Dossier games. They have brought me countless hours of joy and helped shape the detective that I am today. OG Nancy taught me to be confident, fearless, and to not be afraid of my intelligence, even if it was just in a video game world. These games brought me solace, and I will be forever grateful to them for that. If this sounds like a funeral speech, that's because it kinda is. I'm mourning the end of the Nancy Drew series, even if it continues, because it's really hard for me to support a company that has just been so shady over the last few years. This channel will continue to be a safe haven for Nancy Drew fans and for detectives everywhere. I will continue to honor the games, analyze the games, reimagine the games, and explore them in new ways with crossovers like I do with The Sims 4. But the series as I know it is gone, and it's just a bummer that it had to go out like this. Thank you so much for watching, fellow detectives. I really appreciate all of your support because, oh my gosh, the channel is now over 130 subscribers. We didn't just hit 100, you guys kept it going, and I am so grateful. Thank you so much for all of your love and support. I can't wait to keep making content for you guys and celebrating the things that we love about Nancy Drew and the related universes and the original Adventure series. You guys all mean so much to me, and I can't thank you enough. Please like this video if you enjoyed it, and please leave some comments if you want to chat about the game, whether you agree with me or not. Everyone's opinion is valid, and I would love to have a conversation with you. Please also feel free to subscribe and hit that notification bell if you are interested in more Nancy Drew and Sims content, which is almost always much more positive than this. Thank you again so much for watching, fellow detectives. I will see you soon.